Imagine for a second, you capture your enemy's brand new weapon. You're expecting to find some clever tricks, right? Maybe some super advanced piece of tech. But what if what you found was something way more terrifying? Not a secret weapon, but a secret philosophy for waging war. Today, we're diving into the story of a single captured American plane, the P-47 Thunderbolt, because for Germany's top engineers, it revealed a horrifying truth. They weren't just losing a war of tactics, they were losing a war of production they couldn't even begin to comprehend.
So, let's just jump right in. What if the very machine that was destined to completely dominate the skies over Europe, at first glance, looked like an embarrassing failure to the world's most experienced pilots? A plane so big, so heavy, that it seemed to defy every single known principle of fighter design. Well, that was the P-47 Thunderbolt. And for the German Luftwaffe, it was a mystery they were dangerously close to writing off completely.
And you can just feel this sheer contempt in that quote, can't you? See, German pilots flying these nimble Focke-Wulf 19s and Messerschmitt 109s, they were absolute masters of the acrobatic dogfight. So when they first ran into the Thunderbolt in 1943, they just saw this behemoth. It couldn't climb well, it handled like a truck at low altitude, and its pilots seemed to run away from a classic turning fight. The verdict came back fast and clear. This was an inferior American design, a big, clumsy mistake. They were about to find out just how wrong they were.
That lesson began on November 7, 1943. An American pilot, Second Lieutenant William Roach, was low on fuel after fighting some serious headwinds. He spotted what he thought was a friendly airfield and brought his P-47, nicknamed Beetle, in for an absolutely perfect landing. It was only after he cut the engine that he looked around and saw the German markings on all the other planes. And just like that, the Luftwaffe had a pristine, completely undamaged specimen of the very machine they so deeply and dangerously misunderstood.
So you've got this major disconnect happening. On one hand, the official reports are calling the P-47 this clumsy giant. But on the other, you have these troubling details trickling back from the front lines. Pilots were reporting that if a Thunderbolt decided to run, it would just dive away at speeds that nothing in the German arsenal could even touch. They talked about the insane volume of fire coming from its 8 machine guns, and about armor that just soaked up damage that would have torn a German fighter to shreds. Something was not adding up.
And this is where the real investigation starts. Lieutenant Roach's Beetle was quickly repainted with German markings and flown to the top-secret testing facility at Rechlin. You can think of it as the Luftwaffe's Area 51, the place where they took apart enemy tech to see what made it tick. And the man assigned to fly it was Hans Lurche, one of Germany's most brilliant test pilots. His mission? Cut through all the battlefield rumors and find out what the Thunderbolt was really made of.
You know, in his first flights, Lurch's findings seemed to confirm everything the German pilots were saying. Down low, where they loved to fight, the P-47 felt exactly like they said, heavy, slow on the uptake, and just easily outmaneuvered. At 10,000 feet, the Focke-Wulf 190 was, without a doubt, the faster, more agile machine. The initial assessment looked solid. The Thunderbolt was a dud.
But then, Lurch kept climbing, and somewhere above 20,000 feet, the aircraft completely transformed. As the air got thinner, the German engines started to gasp for air, losing power. But the Thunderbolt? It just kept going faster. And this, right here, this was the jaw-drop moment for the German engineers. At 30,000 feet, right where the Allied bombers flew, the P-47 wasn't just a little faster, it was in a completely different league. It was a high-altitude predator, and the Germans had been fighting it all wrong.
And the mystery just got deeper when they started looking inside. Hans Lurch, a guy who had flown over 100 different types of aircraft, was totally baffled by the P-47's cockpit. It had almost double the number of gauges as a German fighter, with all these weird levers and systems for automatic engine management, stuff German pilots had to do all by hand. This wasn't just a different plane, it was a completely different philosophy of technology, and it hinted at the secret to its incredible high-altitude power.
And here it was, the secret sauce, the turbo supercharger. Now, German engineers, they understood the theory, but actually building one that could withstand the insane heat and stress and then mass-producing it, that was a whole other ballgame. It required exotic, high-temperature metal alloys that Germany simply didn't have access to anymore. And yet here it was, not as some rare experiment, but as standard equipment, allowing the P-47's huge engine to breathe easy in the thin air of the upper atmosphere.
And this is the moment where the investigation really shifted. The engineers at Recklin started to realize they weren't just analyzing an airplane anymore. No, they were dissecting an entire industrial system.
The P-47 wasn't just a collection of parts. It was a physical manifestation of American manufacturing power, of its material wealth, and a philosophy of production that was just utterly alien to them.
This became crystal clear when they tore down that massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine. They were just stunned. The materials were of a quality they just couldn't get in large quantities anymore. We're talking high-grade steel alloys, forged aluminum, superior ceramics. But what was really shocking was what they didn't find. No signs of cutting corners, no substitute materials because of wartime shortages. This engine was built exactly as it was designed, with the best possible materials to incredibly precise standards. It was a piece of lab-grade equipment being mass-produced for war. But the real gut punch wasn't that America had this technology. It was that they had it in such abundance. This incredibly complex turbo supercharger system, this perfectly manufactured engine. It wasn't being saved for a few elite squadrons. No, it was standard issue on every single one of the thousands of P-47s rolling off the assembly lines. It was this casual, almost nonchalant use of advanced, resource-intensive technology that was the real revelation. It spoke of an industrial capacity that, from where the Germans were standing, looked practically infinite.
And that feeling of abundance, well, it was reflected everywhere. Let's just run the numbers. Take the firepower. 8 heavy .5 caliber machine guns. Most German fighters carried a mix of cannons and machine guns. The American approach was just more. Let's just achieve overwhelming firepower.
And they certainly didn't skimp on the ammo. 3,400 rounds. Just to put that in perspective, a Focke-Wulf 190 carried about 2,500 rounds for its entire mixed armament. A P-47 pilot could hold down the trigger for nearly 20 straight seconds, just unleashing an absolute storm of lead.
But this number, this is the one that really tells the story. The Americans produced over 125,000 of this one specific high-tech engine. That single number is greater than the total production of all combat aircraft engines combined in Germany throughout the entire war. Just let that sink in for a moment. One American engine model outproduced Germany's entire wartime industry.
And finally, the number of aircraft themselves. While German factories, struggling under constant bombing, tried to produce their highly advanced but very difficult to build fighters, the US just churned out over 15,000 Thunderbolts. And remember, that was just one of several fighter types they were building at the same time. It was a tidal wave of production that Germany simply could not stand against.
So you're the leader of the Luftwaffe. You're armed with this terrifying new knowledge. What do? Well, you do the only thing you can. You try to turn the findings from Rechlin into practical advice for your pilots on the front line. You have the enemy's blueprint, now you have to figure out a way to fight it.
The technical data was immediately translated into new life-or-death rules. The orders sent out to the front were explicit. If you have to fight a Thunderbolt, do it low, where you still have the advantage. Always try to attack from below, using your better rate of climb. And the most important rule of all, no matter what happens, never, ever follow one into a dive. It was a trap, and you could not escape it.
But here's the cold, hard reality of the situation. Even the best tactics in the world don't mean a thing when you are facing an enemy that has, for all practical purposes, unlimited resources. What good does it do to shoot down one P-47 when 2 more show up to take its place the very next day? What good is being a more skilled pilot when you're consistently outnumbered 5-1? The Germans were trying to solve a math problem with tactics, and it was never, ever going to work.
And these numbers, they tell the whole brutal story. By 1944, the U.S. alone was producing nearly 100,000 aircraft a year, against Germany's 25,000. And you have to remember, Germany was also fighting the British and the Soviets. The combined Allied advantage was just staggering. The war in the air had already been decided, not in a turning dogfight, but on the factory floors of Detroit, Wichita, and Long Island.
So, what's the ultimate lesson from this one captured Thunderbolt? It's that the P-47 didn't win because it was a perfect, flawless fighter. In fact, in some ways, German designs were more elegant, maybe even more advanced. No, the P-47 won because it was good enough, because it was rugged, well-armed, and, most importantly, because it could be produced on a scale that was previously unimaginable in human history.
This quote just perfectly sums up the German realization. They weren't being outfought or outsmarted in the traditional sense of the word. They were being buried. Buried under an absolute avalanche of steel, aluminum, and sheer manufacturing might. All of their technical excellence, their incredible engineering genius, was being made irrelevant by an enemy who could simply overwhelm them with numbers.
And that leaves us with a final thought, a question that echoes far beyond World War II and straight into our world today. In any competition, whether it's in technology, in business, or in geopolitics, what really wins? Is it the long pursuit of the perfect, exquisite but rare solution? Or is it the raw power of a simple, robust, good enough idea that can be scaled and deployed to an absolutely overwhelming degree? The lesson of the P-47 Thunderbolt suggests the answer isn't found in the blueprint of a single machine, but in the blueprint of the factory that builds it by the thousands.